Welcome to MavenCast, deep dive conversations with industry experts designed to move your business, technology, and thinking forward.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to MavenCast. I'm Brian Klingbeil, Chief Strategy Officer at Ensono. Very excited to be with you today. Thanks for joining the second part of our discussion of insurance IT innovation at this very exciting time in the industry. A lot of things happening, a lot of change. Today, we're talking about navigating the modernization journey, which all of the carriers are involved in some way, shape, or form. A lot of unique challenges within the insurance space. So here with me again today are some superstars in insurance IT, Holly Olive and Phil Ratcliff, who co-founded a company called Illumifin. During their tenure, they secured $500 billion in funding and established the company as a leader in the space. Prior to Illumifin, they led global business units at DXC Technologies, where they grew revenue and expanded the insurance initiative specifically within DXC. We also have Greg Black, global insurance executive, who has served as a CIO for 2 U.S. carriers and 15 years consulting on modernization, emerging technologies, and process improvement. All three of them are now bringing their extensive experience to our insurance practice at Ensono, and we're thrilled to have them, as are our clients. Holly, Phil, Greg, welcome back to MavenCast. Good to have you guys again.
Thank you.
Brian,
good to be here.
Good to be back.
Good. Today, I think we want to talk a little bit about how carriers can create a modern environment when only some of their applications are currently modernized and some of them can't be. And a lot of the carriers are dealing with various vintages of infrastructure that underpin and support those applications. They can't simply move all of their applications to microservices because it came out. They can't move everything to client server because it came out. So some of them are dealing with mainframes and power series and distributed client servers and infrastructure in cloud and all the way up to microservices in cloud. So what issues do these mixed environments cause, and how do insurers deal with them?
Yeah, I think that carriers often aren't as in tune to the need to tune their infrastructure as they modernize. We're seeing a lot of emphasis on app modernization, and that's a great thing. Movement to cloud, that's a great thing. All those drive benefits and are surprisingly good contributors to the efficient operation of a carrier. But the world is changing so much now for carriers, and they have to interconnect so many platforms, secure so many platforms, maintain latency on so many platforms that are connected, that making sure that entire environment is tuned is become increasingly critical. And it's not a set and forget anymore like it used to be. This is something that has to be an ongoing process for carriers, because as our tools get better, we're going to see more data go up to the cloud, more legacy stuff come out of apps and data both. And as that shifts, we're going to have to retune the environment. We're seeing new tools, new external tools that we're integrating to. So it's one of those things that is not front of mind for most carriers that I'm talking to. And most of them also have very dedicated teams that don't talk to each other. So understanding how to tune that and not sub-optimize the pieces is a challenge, I think, going forward.
And Phil, you've seen this on both sides of the table, right? You've been at a carrier. You are also at DXC, providing that kind of underlying infrastructure and in some cases, the actual application itself. What's your take on this?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's interesting. Insurance companies, particularly the life companies, have struggled with this sort of underlying concept of legacy debt, range of platforms, range of systems. And they battled continually about, do we upgrade? Do we convert? Do we modernize? What do we actually need to do? And a lot of them have stayed with that status quo. But I think the key point now is that the status quo is not a viable position moving forward. You know, the case for infrastructure modernization is growing louder and louder. You know, insurance companies need this to be able to innovate. They need this to be able to launch and design new products. They need this to be able to assemble data so that they can take advantage of the AI revolution. So insurance companies now need to move forward. You know, the cost of those legacy systems, it's less about the physical dollars that they actually spend on them, but more about the fact that they're inhibiting the ability to grow the business. So if you take that as a construct, then how do you actually move the ball down the field? Particularly when you look at the fact that big transformations, big infrastructure modernizations have been fraught with difficulty. And I think here the challenge may be, and I'm interested to hear Greg and Holly's view, is how you build that hybrid environment, how you take data and maybe make it accessible to the cloud, how maybe you introduce the mainframe into more of a cloud-enabled environment. But the case for change is absolutely crystal clear.
We see this a lot with some of our clients, and I know Holly has lived this as an operator. You're being told by the business, I need these features, I need these changes, I need this functionality to support this new product I'm building, but you're maybe saddled with an infrastructure platform or old code that doesn't allow you to meet the needs of the business. This is a long question. But at the same time, when someone like Holly would come forward and say, okay, please give me $10 million so I can migrate everything from this old platform to the new one, the answer is, well, what do I have after you're done with that task? And you're like, well, you have exactly what you have today, but now I can do more. I can add features in the way that you want. Have you had that argument in the past, Holly, and how did you deal with it?
Absolutely. There's a conversation that's happening in the back office of every insurance company right now between the COOs and the IT teams across the board. One of the words that's sort of a buzzword right now that you're hearing is this concept of bimodal or dual strategy, meaning, look, everybody wants the end game. Everybody can see that the place you want to get to is where you have instant access to your data in the cloud, secure. That's where everybody wants to go. But getting there overnight is just not a realistic view for some insurance companies. So then how do you have a dual strategy or a bimodal strategy? And that's really about how do you at least expose the data? How do you have the data, or as much of the data as you can, available in the cloud in a secure environment so you can take care of, or so that you can use these new technologies out there? And we're seeing that by taking the legacy application, but modernizing pieces of the code, applying APIs and microservices to pieces of the code. And so we're seeing steps. What is your timeline for how you're going to move there? Not how do you get there overnight? And that's the strategy is, what is it going to cost us to move there? How quickly can we do that? What are the benefits we get from each step in that transformation journey?
Yeah, and I think we've seen similar, and Greg's been with me on some of these, the journey has to be incremental and not monolithic. So picking off pieces of functionality. I was working with a financial services provider recently who they had a mainframe and they build to peak demand. That peak demand is 8:30 every day when a lot of inquiries came in about, did my trades clear? They built a little microservice to offload that one little piece of functionality off the mainframe and into the cloud. And lo and behold, they could save millions by downsizing the mainframe. So I think what you're espousing, Holly, are things like that. Find those things opportunistically and find a provider, obviously, who's going to help you move things incrementally versus monolithically. Greg, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I want to comment. I think the whole incident or issue that you brought up in the beginning with Holly about give me 10 million and I'll be exactly the same. I think carriers have to come to the acceptance, and particularly in the life side, not so much P&C, that some of this legacy technology is going to be a part of their life for the next decade or more.
It says hybrid is a destination, no longer an unintended consequence.
Right. And so they have to start thinking like that. And I know one of the ways that we think about that, what we call the modern cloud connected mainframe. And while we use the term mainframe in there, it's really any platform. How do you take that and locate it as close as you can physically to your cloud on-ramp so that you basically get lower latency, you get lower data costs, those sorts of things, because this hybrid legacy environment is going to be a fact of life for a long time. And so the question is, how do you tune your infrastructure to acknowledge that fact and not just have this bimodal thing where the legacy's off over here and the cloud's off over here? And I think of the two things as separate. So that example you gave of using microservices to offload a service, there are other ways to do that also with infrastructure. And that's, you got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, sort of a happy marriage. I know another use case, I'm easily the least experienced insurance person of this group, but I always think of actuaries. I wanted to be an actuary when I was in college, only because I knew they made a lot of money. And then I saw how long they had to go in school, and I backed out of that pretty quickly.
You saw the math and thought, maybe not me.
I need money now, not 2 more years. But I've always thought of, okay, if you have a mainframe or maybe, legacy Oracle exit database or something like that, it's probably home to some pretty valuable data. And in the case of mainframe and maybe Oracle Exadata, it might not be the best place to do deep analytics to decide how to price your products. So it always struck me as applications for actuaries. That's a system of engagement. You're not engaging with your end client, you're engaging with your actuary. A system like that could be built in cloud, but leveraging data on the mainframe, because I can't just flip everything from mainframe to cloud tomorrow, as we've talked about. So it seems to me that marriages like that, leveraging the best of both platforms with the best in breed, would be the correct answer as you kind of, again, incrementally move your way to a more modern architecture underneath.
To me, it's almost like each part of that infrastructure environment needs to be an equal partner in the modernization approach, and data is really the lifeblood of insurance companies. If you can get that data flowing across the platforms to make the correct business decision, then that is a great use of investment from insurance companies. So if you can use some microservices to take some transactions out, you can make the data completely accessible. As Greg said, you can reduce the latency. Then you're really starting to get every part of that infrastructure as an equal player.
I've also seen in my personal life, actually, I could tell, because being in IT, I can sort of see some stuff and say, I know what's happening there on the back end. And sometimes if I know I'm on some old insurance product and my interface is a little antiquated, but with the same company, I might be buying a different product. How do these guys deal with identity and access management? Putting you guys on the spot a little bit here. When you're maybe you have some old legacy technology running on a legacy platform, or products, I should say, and maybe you close that book of business and you start producing a new book of business somewhere else, maybe built entirely out of microservices because you had that, but you have customers in both places. Does that pose a problem for carriers?
Yeah, I think it definitely poses a problem. It's one of the areas, though, back to our last point, that you see taking a portion of the microservices. So there's been quite a few carriers that have taken just the customer data, who the customer is, Social Security, the identifying information about who the customer is, put that more in a middleware type of application so that they can take their fully new system and have some data, aka customer data from the old system, and bring those two things together. So at least you now know instantly, does my customer have multiple policies with me? What types of policies do they have? You might not know all the detailed information about that old policy, but you know enough that you're able to pull that into your real-time customer service system. So that's a great example of where we're seeing it. I think claims is another obvious area where maybe we're not moving the entire application to the cloud, but we are able to use some of the insurtechs that are out there around claims. We're able to gather some of the data using AI and able to process claims outside of what was a core legacy system. So in your journey of bringing things to a more modern platform, certainly customer service, actuary was certainly a great place to do it. Underwriting and claims. You're really starting to containerize some of that old legacy platform so that you can have the more modern infrastructure.
And I would add, your question was about your experience as a customer, Brian. As carriers do this, they're also thinking about their own associates and how they have to deal with the multiple platforms and the legacy, and what's the best way to streamline that, reduce cost of training, enable them to be more efficient in dealing with the customers. We see in some cases, and it depends carrier by carrier and their situation, sometimes they'll take the new modern system and basically make that the front end and interconnect that back to the legacy. And that presents a whole infrastructure challenge in its own right. In other cases, particularly in P&C, where we see modernization, they issue the renewal or the new policy on the new system after 18 months. The old system is basically a data repository. It's not really being used for direct transactions operationally by the carrier or by the customer. So it just kind of depends on where they are and what they're trying to achieve. But the point I really want to emphasize is how much that impacts the internal staff of the carrier as much as the customer.
Yeah, and I would think tying some stuff together, trying to create that cohesive client experience on the client side, that would be good. It's probably frustrating as a client to see, why don't you recognize me? oh, well, you need to use a different login to a different website because we acquired this company. But internally, obviously, you want your staff to be able to do things like identify fraud or know if somebody's got multiple policies that they shouldn't have, but also maybe help them with bundling service and help them have a better experience from a competitive point of view, so I can be better than the other carrier and provide a more cohesive set of coverages when I sell multiple things in the kit bag.
There's a Midwestern life insurance company, and they've gotten much better now, but 10 years ago, they were known as a customer, when you called them, you were transferred 7 times before you eventually hung up.
Yeah, very frustrating.
It's that issue that I think carriers are really struggling with when they try to modernize.
Yeah, and it's almost a unique issue for insurance companies. So everyone is expecting that high quality of service, and then you step back to insurance, and unless they have the ability to bring that data together, you're getting service which looks like it's more fit for the 1980s than the 2020s.
Yeah, and I would think the average insurance customer probably skews demographically a little bit older, and therefore creating kind of a compelling online experience becomes even more important because maybe they're not as comfortable using technology. I'm thinking of my mother here. It's got to be a pretty easy experience and an engaging experience. Like the UXs that these guys are putting out, I would think quite a bit of time goes into that to make a pleasant online experience for checking, was my premium received, or what does my policy look like, and making it easy to navigate web pages. And I would think having a kind of disjointed infrastructure that doesn't work together would be a real detriment to that.
100%. And particularly when you think about the fact that you're often not connecting with your insurance company with the frequency that you would connect with an Amazon or another retail company, or potentially your bank. So each time you connect, it's almost like a new transaction. There's more learning that needs to go in there. So having that data assembled, constructed, and orchestrated in a logical way is super important.
And big friendly tiles so that I don't have to relearn the process every time that I go in. I would like that myself, I'm sure.
In timely response, unfortunately, social media has cut our average attention span. And if we can't get there fast and complete it fast, we become frustrated much quicker than we used to.
Yeah, maybe a topic for the next session, this idea of obviously the social media companies are extremely good at creating an engaging user experience. I'm wondering how much insurance companies are spending on the same thing, or how relevant it is to their business. But today we talked about infrastructure. I'd like to thank Holly, Phil, Greg for their time. Obviously, getting that kind of incremental journey to the cloud or microservices or whatever the destination is versus this monolithic experience of the past, which have tended to fail, I think is the takeaway here today. So making sure you set up your organization, your service provider, your own internal cost structures, et cetera, to allow for a more step-by-step incremental journey to your ultimate destination, and understanding you're going to go through a period of time when hybrid is the answer, and it might be forever. Because yes, we're at this point now where the next generation of infrastructure services have come out, but more are coming. And 3 years from now, we'll look at what we have today and think, oh, that was antiquated. So thanks again, Holly, Phil, and Greg, for your time, and we'll see everybody in episode 3.
Thanks for listening to MavenCast. For more Maven content, including articles, interviews, and videos, visit themavenreport.com.